Imperfect podcast with me, Kevin, and Coach Witt, my beautiful sidekick. We're going to talk today about trust. Trust, how essential trust is to a relationship, how easily trust can ruin not only today, but yesterday and tomorrow in your relationship. And we're going to talk about a whole lot more. Let's get started. All right, so trust, trusting that this signal is actually bouncing around the world, getting somewhere and streaming live on any number of social media platforms is something we all kind of have right now. But if I had told you 20 years ago, you could talk in your living room and someone would hear you in China, that'd have been really weird, but that's super normal now. Trust is an important part of a relationship. Last week, we talked all about safety, security. If you don't have safety and security in your relationship, you're going to have problems. Well, trust may be an even more important, essential part of your relationship. So the first thing, though, that we got to conquer if we're going to talk about trust is, what is trust? I mean, what is trust in the first place, right? Let's set a definition.
I think, especially in our relationship, trust in you is me being able to lay my vulnerability at your feet and knowing that you'll honor that. And I'm sitting here giggling about like the most trustworthy thing that I felt like I ever put in your hands is I jumped into the San Francisco Bay and swam in the waters of Alcatraz with you, having never swam in open water. And I just literally had the thought of there's no other human being that I would have done that with.
Yeah, trust like beyond any reasonable belief. We didn't teach Whitney how to use her fins, so we had a wetsuit on and fins. Show you swim the channel from Alcatraz at that event. We did it solo, like just it was 5 of us. So I guess that's not solo, but very small group. And immediately we got separated from everyone. I couldn't figure out why Whitney was so slow. Eventually, I just grabbed her wetsuit and was pulling. We never taught her how to use the fins, and so she was actually underwater like a bicycle with her fins in front of her. So literally the entire way Whitney was paddling backwards until almost over halfway through, I showed her. She's like, oh, well, that makes more sense, right? We almost got swept out to sea, almost drowned. It went horrible. But it was an amazing experience in trust. I couldn't believe this is not only her first open swim. She'd never swam more than 100 meters in her life. It's like, hey, I trust you. Let's do this. Maybe the trust was a little misplaced or overplaced there, but it actually turned out to be something fantastic. I went back 3 months later, was able to swim the channel, was able to complete that. That helps not towing someone paddling backwards. Just
yes, P.S. We did not complete that that swim, but there's a certain amount of trust in our relationship that I was able to just conquer that fear. First, I don't really like to swim. Second of all, like the idea of, shark infested waters is pretty terrifying. And, there are things outside of our control, right? But there is this level of security in our relationship. Speaking of last week's call that we had, is that, that trust is there. The trust of knowing that you have my back, it's priceless.
Yeah, and I think it's important to talk about trust, like the definition, right? The Google definition, the firm belief in the reliability, truth, ability, or strength of someone or something, right? So it's a belief in. But when you really look at trust of your partner, it comes down to two main aspects. I trust your character, right? I trust who you are and that you'll do what you say you'll do, and I trust your competence. So you can split trust into character and competence, right? Do you have the character is what you're saying true, but then also do you have the competence? Because I may trust Whitney implicitly, whatever she tells me, but I also don't trust Whitney. If my life depended on Whitney deadlifting 1,000 pounds, I would have very little trust in Whitney's ability to do that just because of her competence, right? She's not of a size or ability to be able to deadlift 1,000 pounds. That trust, that doesn't mean I lack trust in her as a person, so character, but it does mean I lack trust and competence. I think that's a super important delineation for most relationships is, hey, am I lacking trust in you because you're a liar? Or am I lacking trust in you because I've seen you fail at this over and over and over?
Well, I think there's certain things that we are very trustworthy about. And, if you have shown me that I can't trust you in a certain area, then I don't know, like, there's a lot of building to understand if that's even a possibility. But of course, no, I can't deadlift 1,000 pounds. I wish I could. But, I wonder though, with that particular kind of trust, is you trust in who I am. Is that enough trust to figure out, like, inside of me, that I would be able to maybe find someone to help me lift that thousand, that deadlift
Yeah,
that
well,
thousand?
I think people screw this up all the time because I think people think, well, you have to trust your partner fully. And I don't think that's true. I think there are many, many things that I'm completely untrustworthy about, right? Flaws in my character and flaws in my competence, right? If our relationship depended on my ability to keep my weight trim and to have a six pack, I have given you no reason to trust that. If you look over the last, 10, 11 years, like there is there's no way that you would have that trust for me. There are places I ought not to be trusted. Like and that's true for everyone, not just me, right? Like there are things you're not trustworthy in. There are things that you don't trust yourself to do. So why in the hell would you expect your spouse to trust you on every single item, right? We have to first get this awareness of ourselves that we're all kind of unworthy of trust at some level, right? And seeing, like, well, what are the things where is trust well placed in me and where is trust not well placed? Like imagine if your spouse is an alcoholic and that alcoholic is right off of relapse, they go into AA, they're getting clean. So maybe they're 3 weeks clean and they say, I'm never going to drink again. Well, you may even in character say, wow, they've really come a long way. I really believe them and I believe that. And in competence, though, understand that they are an alcoholic and part of alcoholism is relapse. And so this probably isn't over. I can believe what you're saying and not believe that the outcome you're saying will come true at the same time. I think that would help a lot of couples to understand that delineation.
Well, I've seen this a lot in our coaching programs too. With a lot of the women that I've coached, is, they're talking about their husbands and they're talking about these patterns of behaviors that have happened in years and years and years of marriage. And the same is true in our marriage, right? That how can I believe what he says when I have all of this evidence of it not happening? How do I know that this is the time? And a lot of times we can't trust the words that are coming out of someone's mouth. We actually have to witness the change. Like, give it some time and let him or her show you the actual things that she's doing to take the steps toward changing. Therefore the trust comes in, because I often say that talk is cheap. Show me.
Well, that's the thing, right? We have come through powerful events all the time, and at the end, they're fired up. They really see themselves. They really are going to and are changed. And we constantly remind them, don't go home and tell your significant other, don't go tell your wife, don't go tell whoever that you're changed. Don't do that. Show them that you're changed. When they ask, hey, what's different? Bam, now talk about it. Because now you've earned the trust and competency. And so when you add the words, the character can match the competency. When we start talking about something, hell, we talk about shit all the time and it doesn't happen. Telling somebody what you're going to do has very little value. Doing something for them and having them ask you, like, wow, why'd you do that? That'll build trust, right? That's show me, don't tell me. Show me, don't tell me approach. But what that really is putting competence in front of character, not just believe me because you love my kid, you trust me, but hey, here, look, this is why you can believe me, because of this. Here's the money in the bank. Here's the exercise that I did. Here's what has happened, and now match that to my character, rather than, hey, just trust me, I'm going to do this, which oftentimes erodes trust more than anything. So the next thing I want to talk about with trust, we want to talk about, but this is my personal addition to the thing, is there's no halfway with trust. And that's a really hard thing to handle. You either trust or you don't. And that's a really tough thing. I mean, I violated trust with Whitney. She violated trust with me. Really, I'd say, like, on the average, if I looked at the last 11 years, I'm more of the perpetrator in the violation of trust than she is, right? And trust is not a halfway thing. We say all the time, trust is earned, right? But the truth is, trust is given, and then someone either honors it or doesn't. Like it's not really earned up front. It's earned after it's already given, which means trust can be violated and breached. But there's no real halfway. I can't half trust you. I can't say, well, I don't know if I trust you. If I'm saying I don't know if I trust you, guess what? I don't trust you. If you say, well, I don't know you well enough to trust you, then you don't trust me, and that's okay, right? We don't have to trust anyone. We don't have to trust our spouse. But there's really trust is a yes, no thing. Now, it can be very specific things, like I trust my husband with my kids, but I don't trust my husband alone in Cabo, or I trust my husband, to take care of X, Y, Z, but A, B, and C is terrible at. But it always is really a yes or no. I don't know if that's been your experience with.
It is, for sure. It is, yes, I do trust you in this area, and no, I don't. And what I think has helped is establishing some ground rules. Hey, you brought up I don't trust my husband alone in Cabo. So what are the ground rules that you are going to lay out so that there can be trust in that area? Because I think there's a reasonable risk in wanting to trust your partner, right? Because, me trusting you, I'll go back to this, you brought up your weight thing, and hey, there's a reasonable risk, right, in me trusting that this is the time that you're going to finally conquer this demon that lives inside of you when it comes to weight. Me trusting you brings out the best in who you are, and it brings out the best in me. Yes, I would agree that there's a big piece of me that doesn't trust, but there's a want. So I guess it's a little confusing.
Well, I think that's powerful to be able to say, I want to trust you, which is so often the truth in relationships. It's not that I trust you, but I really want to trust you. Can we build that? It's a more honest conversation, right? I think we've had that conversation many times. I think we're kind of a weird couple that way. But it's like, hey, I want to trust you. I hate that I'm leaving town and I don't trust that XYZ will happen. But I really want to. And so now we can start building to that, right? Like how many times, right now we're talking about my weight, so let's keep talking about it. I'm down 30 pounds, in 2 months, and it feels really good and I'm on track. But how many times have I done that before? And then it relapses because trust doesn't just exist right now. You have a whole 13 years of history with me. So it would be kind of crazy. You'd almost be an insane person to fully trust that this is the time, right? And at the same time, without that trust, what can we really build? So it's like, hey, I want to trust that this is the same time. You know what? Me too. I feel the same way. One of the things that can help trust is to be honest again, where you may or may not be trustworthy on competence or character, right? There's certain things I'm going to lie about. There's certain things I'm going to hide based on my past experiences. I think that one of the interesting things about trust is it does not only exist in the present. Trust time travels, right? If I break trust with Whitney, which has happened, right, more times than I would like to think about. Like it's hard to express that, man, I've broken the trust of my wife. When I broke trust with Whitney, it didn't just happen the one time and then now there was trust and then now there's lack of trust and now we've healed that and then there's trust again. No, when I break trust, it destroys all the trust all the way back. It makes Whitney question the entire relationship backwards and then question, well, where the hell are we going? It affects the past and the future simultaneously. And that's why we love trust, because it makes us feel secure in the past and future. But when it's violated, which will almost invariably happen in any relationship of any amount of length or meaning, you have destroyed something very important, and you destroyed it not just today. If you cheat on your wife, for example, she will wonder all the way back to the wedding and even before. And then we'll wonder all the way forward to when you die, is this worth the risk anymore? And that is normal. That's how trust works, because it's amazing when you can rely on it. But if you can't, you're fully exposed. No one knows how to mess you up more than your spouse. So when trust fails, it amplifies.
Well, your certainty collapses. It's not just the certainty in your significant others, the certainty inside of me, in yourself, that collapses in that particular moment. And then it drives you all the way back in the past, and then it brings you all the way into the future. But the certainty in who am I, and in my judgment of character, and can I even trust myself in that moment? And that's to me, one of the most frustrating things about wanting to lay that vulnerability out and trust another human being. As the second, that is broken, then I start to question who I am to my core.
Right. And when you're lying to your spouse, which is being untrustworthy, even if it works, especially if it works, you're violating trust. If your relationship is built on lies and built on things that you don't talk about, you're going to have a hard time having that relationship last, because you are really tearing at the fabric of trust. One of the things I'm very proud of with Whitney is that at this point, there's very little that we lie about. And I would say nothing. Like, I would say we have no lies between us. But I'm kind of smart enough to know I'm sure there are dozens of lies I'm telling myself that I believe that I tell to her. And this will happen. Like, so trust, another way to think about trust in a relationship too, is I've got to trust myself. I've got to trust Whitney. Well, I don't have to, but I choose to trust Whitney, and I have to trust the relationship. So there's really more three aspects than two. It's not just my wife, I'm over. I trust my wife. Do I trust myself? Do I trust my wife? And do I trust the relationship, right? I was given the example earlier of, I trust that I can safely handle gasoline in just about any circumstance. I can put it in a can, I can get it out of the pump, I can have it in my car. I very much trust that. I also trust that I can handle fire, and I don't burn myself, and I don't burn other people, and I don't catch buildings on fire. When those two things come together, though, my trust level is very, very low. Even though I have a history of blowing things up with gasoline and fire, my trust level is going to go way down. I'm going to get very nervous when those things start to come together. There are people who individually are great and together explosive, and this doesn't work. So what is your trust level in yourself? And it's usually way lower than we want to admit. Let's be real. Okay. And you cannot expect to trust someone else more than you trust yourself. I'll just tell you that right here. If you don't trust yourself at all, you're going to be a very untrusting person, and you're going to be a terror to be in a relationship with. How do I know that? That's how I was for a lot of my life. That's how I still am in certain areas. And it hurts our relationship, because I'm not able to trust because I don't trust myself. If you can't trust your partner, that's going to be a big problem. But also you have to trust that it's going to work together and that you're going to navigate life together effectively.
Well, I mean, let's face it, we deal with the generations and relationships that have happened, in our own lives. I mean, I've had several relationships before Kevin, and there's baggage that comes from those relationships of either being cheated on or lied to or whatever, and you bring that into your current relationship. And I'll go back to building some ground rules of hey, this is what I need to make me feel safe and secure inside of this relationship, and to trust you, and to go back to trusting myself. We had this conversation this week where I think, Kevin, you actually said out loud that, hey, this is what I'm thinking, and this is what I'm doing, but I don't know, maybe you know me better than I know myself, that maybe I'm telling myself, some stories that because I don't trust sometimes the story that I'm telling myself.
I think oftentimes after a period of time in a relationship, we do see our spouse better than they see themselves, because we have the perspective. Because you're going to see me based on my actions, and I'm going to see me based on my intentions. I know what I meant to do, right? My son meant to come and clean up the living room. What he actually did was trip, drop his drink all over the couch. So his intention of cleaning the living room turned into a giant mess that we all have to figure out, right? We see the action. He sees the intention while he's trying to help, right? I think that's simple to see. And if we want to build trust, we're going to have to invert that a little bit. Try to see other people for their intentions and judge yourself by your actions. That's hard to do sometimes. It's really easy to do that with your spouse, because you only see the actions. You don't live in their head, thank God. And so you don't hear their intentions. You just see the actions. Right. And so with trust, I think that's an important piece. I want to hit on something you said that's so important is, when you sleep with someone, the old, we all got the STD talk in high school. When you sleep with someone, you slept with all their partners also, right? Who knows what's happening? It's kind of like that with trust too. Like when you're trusting someone, you have a history of relationships that informs that trust that you're not going to be able to get away from. You're not going to be able to pretend like, well, this person's different than my mom, or this person's different than my ex-wife. You're going to have ghosts. You're going to have ruts and patterns from those past relationships that are going to come forward. And what's more complicated is so will the person on the other side. They're going to have ruts and they're going to have patterns. You've got to open your mind to allow for new patterns, and you've got to constantly remind yourself that this is not this. My marriage to Whitney is not my marriage to my first wife, or my relationship with my mother, or my relationship with any girlfriend that I had. Those relationships informed me. They were good. They taught me things, but she's not the same person. When we're not careful, we walk in with the expectations of all the past and expect this person to be the same, and they're not. And when those expectations mismatch, we tend to say, well, what's wrong with you? This is how it is.
Well, it's the willingness to have that conversation, right? Because I think some couples just won't go there, and there's a willingness with us. I know that I've straight up told you, hey, I don't know what woman you're talking to right now, but that's not me. And having that conversation with you in that moment, and not just stuffing, because I know like my past history is like, I'm just going to stuff this and I'm not going to even talk about it. And then it erodes what's happening inside of our relationship, because you're not trusting me in that moment because you're actually talking about someone before me. And I think it's hey, whoa, remember who you're talking to. Look at all of the evidence of what I've shown you in the past 14 years.
Right. So hopefully this conversation, guys, can help you thinking about trust. Like maybe there is trust in your relationship. Maybe there's not trust in your relationship. Remember, it's kind of an on-off thing. It just is. Like, it's not like other things. There's no gradation of trust. If you're like, well, I mostly trust him, then you don't trust. And that's okay. Being able to admit that is a great place to build trust from, right? And you build trust over time. Trust is one of those things that can be broken in a second. And then it erodes, then it builds back slowly over time. And that's just what it is. Why? Because you have to stack. Like if you were happily married for 5 years and then you do something terrible, right? And then now you're good again. It's going to be at least 5 years before that's healed, because there was a 5-year period where one partner thought everything was great and it wasn't. So you're going to have to get through that. Like that's just kind of a natural thing, so that the experiences stack up on the other side of that.
And if you want this relationship, and I know there's many people out there that have been in the boat of, I don't know if I can trust this person again. Just remember, trust is a really courageous act that you can do for yourself. Start trusting yourself first, and then bring that trust into your relationship.
Yeah. And I think it's so important for us to make ourselves trustworthy first, and then look for that trust. And I think there's a lot of power in just admitting I don't trust, but I want to, and I want to figure that out. And you can start to develop trust in very small windows of, hey, I can trust you about fatherhood, or I can trust you about work, or I can trust you, and then expand from there. And it's okay to say, I don't trust you in X, Y, or Z. We've got to develop some kind of a skin, because the truth is there's a myriad of things Whitney doesn't trust me to do or not do. There's a myriad of things I don't trust her to do or not do. If our life depended on Whitney being in a good mood when she woke up, I think we're in trouble. Okay. Like that's just, does that mean I don't trust her? No, I trust that she's going to wake up a certain way. It's not going to be super chipper. Right.
And I trust you're going to make my coffee.
Exactly. So guys, hopefully this has been a powerful conversation for you about trust. We talked about security last week, talking about trust. We'll continue this. What we want is for you to have a powerful conversation with your spouse, with the people around you, so your relationships can get better. If inside of this podcast, all that's happened is that you've had some cool thoughts, and that's kind of neat, well, great. You just sedated with information, and really nothing's going to change in your life. I challenge you to just take action. Think of some insight you had and put it into action, because we don't change. Our relationships don't get better because of insight. They get better because of actions. If you can go do one different thing, that can take the next step towards building trust, or whatever it is you want to build in your relationships.